Welcome to Real Estate in the Tri-State, where we talk about all things buying, selling, and investing in the Dubuque area. Featuring experienced locals giving you their real estate insight. My name is Abby Rottler, and here is your host, my husband, Rob Rottler.
Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Real Estate in the Tri-State. This is episode number 25 with today's guest, who is the Rental Licensing and Housing Inspection Supervisor for the City of Dubuque Housing Department. As the supervisor, he coordinates licensing and inspections of nearly 10,000 rental units in Dubuque. Wow, that's a lot. He's worked in the housing department for almost 9 years in Dubuque and had previously held a similar role in Iowa City before that. He also has experience in construction as a foreman. Needless to say, this man knows his way around houses. Ladies and gentlemen, the great and powerful Ben Pothoff.
Howdy, howdy. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to have you on, Ben. You want to just get things kicked off here, telling us a little bit about yourself so we can get to know you better.
Sure, yeah. So I guess first and foremost, I'm a proud dad and husband. I've got 2 little kids at home, 3 and a 6-year-old, and they certainly keep me on my toes. So that's what comes first in my life. And then I was raised in Dubuque, moved away for college, and then spent about a decade away from Dubuque and came back and have been with the city of Dubuque since as an employer. And it's been a great opportunity to have influence over my community and see it improve in the ways that I'd like to move this community. So.
Very good. Very good. So born and raised in Dubuque?
Yep.
Cool. Yep. Which school did you go to?
Hempstead, class of 99.
Hempstead 99. Very good. Do you remember back about that time people were worried that the year or the world was going to end?
Absolutely.
Weren't they?
Yeah.
I can't remember. I was too young, but what do you remember about that?
Oh, Y2K. I mean, in hindsight, it's just another one of the end of the worlds. In my history, as you get older, there's more and more days that are the end of the world.
Yeah.
And hopefully, that doesn't come in our lifetime or our kids' lifetime. But, every time it comes up, it seems like that gets people talking. So
Yeah, absolutely. And, we actually met. I am pretty well involved in the Dubuque REI meetup. For those of you who don't know, it's a monthly third Tuesday of every month. Real estate investors in the area get together, talk about things that are happening, and just chalk talk, basically, real estate. And I met you at one of those. So it just goes to show, we were talking about before we got on the mic, you're a city employee, and you're employed by the city, and this is just you being very generous with your time and wanting to share, messages that people probably need to hear. And I appreciate being on and looking forward to this. So I guess what got you interested in real estate?
Yeah, so I guess at an early age, my parents had me involved in their business. So my dad owned, with his brother, about 15 doors. So not a ton, but enough that I was pulled out to I guess my first memory really of being excited was being there for a real estate auction and having my dad buy a place or two through auction. I don't know, there's just something about that experience. If you've ever done real estate auctions, it's exciting. It's kind of heat of the moment decision making. I've done a couple myself and been high bidder on a couple, and it's different than any other method of buying real estate. So that got me interested a little bit. And then, just being drug along when he's doing maintenance or service work, I was the closet painter. So, before I could do anything else, he'd throw me in a closet with a paintbrush and a big sheet to make sure the floor was covered. And that's where I started to learn how to do some of the work and see what he did and see how it made sense, especially rental properties made sense to me at an early age, seeing how him and his brother did that, and learned a lot of the little tips and tricks along the way to be able to manage or maintain a property myself, and that's kind of what got me into it.
Very good. Yeah. It's been a trend. People I have on here, a lot of times they're family members were involved in real estate, or they got kind of a sniff of it at a young age. Yep. So very cool. Now, how old were you when you? Did you mention how old you were when you started kind of getting involved in that, or you remember some of those things?
Well, boy.
Not exactly, but
Yeah, as a kid, I mean, I would have been, my parents had been in it since, I think they're going on nearly 50 years of property ownership and management. And so I was into it as young as I can remember. I think when I really got into it for myself was when I went off to college. I lived in a rental complex, and it was 42 units, and I met with the owner when I moved in and kind of talked to him, built that relationship. And I think that's huge, is just building relationships in whatever you do. And he got a sense that I might be a fairly responsible young man and had some of the skills he needed of a resident manager. And he had one that he knew was going to be moving on in the next year. So built that relationship, ended up being resident manager for that complex during my time in Iowa City until I bought my own house. And that was, a great experience because I got to learn on somebody else's dime, make a little money, earn some free rent. So that's really, I guess, when I first kind of dove into it.
Yeah, 40. So you were managing 42 units.
Yeah. While going to school and starting construction. So.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that time?
I remember, so I remember growing up, holidays are not sacred. Right. So if you own rental property, you better expect calls on the holidays. That's when everything goes wrong. It's it's the rule.
Yeah.
And so I remember meeting my wife down there and having her over for Thanksgiving. And a very specific memory is having a tenant come knock on my door and go, hey, I got a problem. And it's like, I'm here with my girlfriend on Thanksgiving Day and we're just pulling the turkey out. And I'm like, all right, no. This is what it's all about.
And you were living there.
Yep. You can't escape it when you live there.
No, yeah, they knew where you were. They were going to find you.
Yep.
I am going to just plug this laptop in.
You bet.
Sorry. Okay. Wow. So Thanksgiving Day, and was it a pretty big problem?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you what the problem was. It was more the experience of having that person. It's. I don't want to say it's a trend, but it really does. It seems like every holiday that passes without a call, you kind of count your blessings because things tend to go wrong on the holidays. People cook more, they do more. There's more people in the house, there's more activity, and that's when things go wrong. So.
Wow. What else do you remember or did you learn? What was the biggest learning and growing, I guess, you got from that time you're in college, you're getting started in construction, and you're managing?
I think the biggest thing I got was probably the importance of building relationships. I think, managing that property, it wasn't my dime, so I didn't have that, that looming, if the rent doesn't come in, I'm in trouble kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I did want to have respect from the owner. I wanted him to feel like I was doing a good job, so I made sure that I did my best. But I also didn't want to treat tenants like they weren't people. Like, you're not just a paycheck to me. It makes no difference to me if you pay your rent or don't, other than it reflects on my quality of management. So I did, I went out of my way to make sure that people, did their part, met their agreement, so that it didn't reflect poorly on me. But it really wasn't. It wasn't quite the same as when you own and manage. So it gave me, I guess, a different point of view. And now when I'm looking at it from more the owner standpoint, right now I own 3 doors, and it's just. I guess it gives me more empathy for the situations tenants go through and more likely to try to come up with creative solutions because I did that before. So
very good. Yeah, that is great. I try to think back to my college days here. I'm just trying to relate. I did not really know very many people, right? I wasn't around the right crowd of people that could take on 42 units and be in school. So man, props to you, always, being knowledgeable and really caring about what you're doing, and that professionalism for a guy to put his 42 units in your hands at that young age, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was quite an experience. It gave me a lot of a jumping off point, I guess.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about what you do now and your work responsibilities and your mission and those type of things.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess kind of getting into how I got here, before I moved back to Dubuque, I called and kind of found out what the status of things were. And I had a little bit of experience in inspections, riding along with my dad back in the day. And I knew things in Dubuque were good for rental owners, but not necessarily good for tenants, and that there were some properties in town. When I came back to town, I thought, what is the city doing for code enforcement? And saw a lot of opportunity for improvement. So I called and kind of got the lay of the land and decided, there's a lot of opportunity in Dubuque, and I want to make sure that, that community continues to move in the right direction and doesn't go back to, last one out, turn the lights off, kind of what I remember growing up. So got back here and just kind of quickly moved up into my current role. And what I do now is run. We've got a small team. It's 8 inspectors. One of them does nuisance enforcement. The other 7 are involved in aspects of rental property inspections and code enforcement. And then we've got a permits clerk that does a lot of the administrative work. And it's actually close to 11,000 units. So you shortchanged us a little in the description, but I didn't correct it earlier, so that's on me.
It's going up, 11,000.
Yeah, so one of the things we did early on was recognize that there are quite a few units in Dubuque that weren't licensed when I got here. And I had projections, of what we thought that might look like, but it ended up being nearly 20% of the rental units in town weren't licensed. They were operating under the radar, so no inspections, nothing, no accountability, I guess. And that works okay for really responsible owners. You would never need an inspection, but at that time we had quite a few that were kind of taking advantage. And when rental property owners take advantage, it tends to be of the poorest people in our community, and they don't have the resources or ability to help themselves out. So, this goes, I think, a lot further than people realize. It's not just about making our neighborhoods pretty. It's about making sure that our people that are in the lowest income classes have opportunities to get themselves up into that living wage job and don't have those barriers to success because they're constantly being displaced by, unfortunate housing situations. Heat goes out, they get booted out of their house because the landlord doesn't make repairs or whatever it is. Those things come up, I think, way more frequently than what I anticipated. And certainly, from my experience in Iowa City, it happens more frequently here in Dubuque. And I think that has a lot to do with the age of the structures in Dubuque too. And in Dubuque, it seemed like before I got here, property management was more of it's a hobby or a side hustle. And I think it's become a lot more of a business now. And people recognize that if you're going to get into this, you have to do a little research, educate yourself, and not just think that, the most important thing about being a landlord is collecting that check. The most important thing is you're providing somebody housing. And that's pretty critical. So.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. There was a lot there. You touched on so many things that I think are, gets overlooked. Wow, where do I even start to unpack some of that stuff? I mean, so 20% were not even licensed. How do you figure that out? And how do you get them licensed?
I think it's the same as anything. The first thing you do is recognize there's a problem. And I will say it probably didn't make me a very popular guy when I started recognizing all the problems with the program in the past and pointing them out, because you can't just kind of brush them under the rug. You have to identify the problem, expose it, and then create a solution. So, that was the first step is, hey, we know that there's some units. Let me show you that this is happening. And when we started to look, it was like, wow, this, I had somebody say, well, there's 100 units, and once we get those cleaned up, that's it. And it's like, no, I don't think so. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is the 100 we know about. There's 400 or 500, 600 looming.
Yeah, is it going in and seeing like which properties are owner occupied, like the tactics of it? Is it going into like Beacon and identifying which ones are not owner occupied? And then, okay, is that one licensed to us? If not, what's going on there?
It's a little bit of that, but it's not quite that simple. And I think that's where everybody goes first is like, well, that's simple. Pull a spreadsheet, or pull a report out of, the assessor's records. But you forget about the commercial properties aren't going to be owner occupied, right? So we've got 28,000 residential properties. If we just break those off in Dubuque, approximately, if we break off the residential properties and then we look at who receives their tax bill at that address. That gives us a starting off point, but there's an awful lot of people that don't get their tax bill sent to their house because they get it sent to their attorney because it's under an LLC or a trust, or what I'm saying is there's a lot of different reasons that's not going to work. What we found to be kind of one of the more successful things is so we watch the listings in real estate. I'm a real estate junkie anyway, so
I
want to see when things come up. I want to see what market rates are for rents, for selling. And that's just part of my passion.
Mm-hmm.
But when I start doing that, I see, that place, I can see in the photos that they're listing, it has code deficiencies. Not unusual for a place to have code deficiencies, but it's kind of unusual when they're broadcasting them in their photos. So that might key us into looking to see if it was licensed or inspected. And sometimes we look and it was licensed and it hasn't been inspected in a number of years. And we might say, well, now seems like a good time to get in there and get that inspected because we see that there's potentially issues. And the other way we have a lot of them come up is actually we go out and do like grass, weeds, garbage complaints. And as we're out, we're sending notice to the property owner and we're seeing that they don't live there. And so we just kind of discover by default those ones. And, the biggest tip we give when we train landlords on being successful is how to keep us out of your business, basically. Keep a code compliant place, keep it clean, be neighborly to your neighbors. I know you don't live there, but talk to your tenants about being neighborly, introduce them to the neighbors if you can. That's not always feasible, but we don't want to be in your business any more than you want us there. So the shorter and briefer our visits are to your properties, the better for us. That means you're doing things right and we don't have to take corrective action.
Very good. Yeah, I'd like to dive into some more of those, landlord tips and tenant tips and those type of things. Talk about being, in order to do kind of what you felt was right and what needed done, not Mr. Popular, you mentioned. That's tough. That's a tough place to be in. I mean, you know what's right. You know what probably needs done here. And, probably getting some slack for it.
Yeah, I mean, it might be even a little more tough when your folks own or manage rentals. So changing a business model that they had been used to for a number of years. But it goes with, I guess, my core beliefs, and integrity is just one of the things that I think is most important. And if I don't have integrity, then I don't have anything. And forget about all the relationships that I've tried to build. If I don't have integrity and hold everybody to the same standards, it's out the door. So that's kind of where I center my moral compass, I guess, is on integrity. And then, relationships will come. People that appreciate integrity and appreciate that my heart is in it for the right reasons will get over the fact that it might cost them a few dollars now, but in the long run, if you're looking at in terms of our community, it's going to improve it. And I think, like especially visiting with the folks at the REI meetings, the majority of those folks are in it for the right reasons. They want to make some money, but they're not trying to take advantage of the poorest or the most downtrodden for their own advantage. They want to be fair and responsible and respectful, and they, I think, for the most part, understand that we're all kind of working towards the same goals, and the ones that aren't, we're probably not going to have much success if they're, either from the city standpoint, they're not going to be successful because we're going to be enforcing against them, but also from the other landlords' perspective, you don't want those people kind of putting that industry or that trade in a negative light. So you want to kind of move them along too.
Yeah, very good. Man, your answers are so thorough. It's like we did not rehearse these questions, folks. It's like they're so thorough. I don't even know where to start breaking them down, but it's great. And yeah, I mean, the overall goal and the mission of what you do, it's improving the community. Absolutely. And you kind of start from the bottom. I mean, you start from the ground level, like, some of the conditions of these properties, they're just not very livable, not very suitable. So you talk about affordable housing and those type of things. If you bring those people up, it brings everyone else around them up type of thing. Right.
Yeah, it's the bringing up the floor model. I mean, you just want to set your floor a little higher for what you'll accept in your community. And then, I think that elevates everybody around those folks that are kind of at that base level too. So.
Yes, absolutely. Go into a little bit about, what you're looking for in the inspection. I know when I pull up the website here, I have it on the TV. Correct me if I'm wrong. You go, like, if any landlord's listening, or if they're curious about what they might get inspected on, whatever, would they go to City of Dubuque Housing Department on Google, obviously, click on the Housing and Community Development Department, and then you go into Landlord Resources?
Yes.
And then there's some information about the licensing and inspections, becoming a landlord, successful rental property management binder. You guys do a class.
We do. Yeah. And it's good you brought that up because it's actually going to have to change. Given COVID, we can't bring 50 to 100 people into a classroom like we could. So we're working on our first live broadcast class, and we're going to record it also. And our thought is, we've had a lot of comments from landlords that attend that class. And have you taken that, Robert?
I have not. I'm due here very soon to do it. I need to. And but I've heard a lot of great things about it.
Yeah, so we get a ton of feedback. We get a lot of negative feedback before people take it saying, hey, that's kind of ridiculous. I have to come in and waste my Saturday or a whole day to take this class because the city requires it. And it's funny because those people are the ones that are most likely to come up to us after the class and go, I'm so glad you guys made me do this. I learned so much. This is such helpful information. And so we heard that we were doing good with that class and that people really liked it. But people also commented that, this one and done thing really isn't great. And we totally agree. It was kind of a limited start. And now we're at a point where we're going to try to do a launch for like some type of continuing education. So a couple times a year, we're going to try to develop something where we can get out either live or virtual trainings that are focused on certain things that we're seeing needing some improvement in the community, whether that's, people not knowing certain aspects of the property maintenance code or possibly landlord-tenant law issues. Like if we see a recurring issue coming up, we'll try to help landlords so that they're not experiencing that same issue that somebody else experienced. And likewise, we're creating tenant education programming too. And there's a University of Wisconsin model that we're looking at and trying to create something on that side of the house too, because we recognize like landlords, the good news is there's a set kind of number of them. There's about, give or take, between 14 and 1,800. It kind of fluctuates depending on who's coming in and out, but that's a group we can engage with, and they're fairly accessible. We can send mailings to. We know who they are. Tenants, there's about 11,000 of them, and they're kind of constantly revolving, right? So we have transient population that comes into the community, then leaves, and how do we educate that 11,000 when they turn over so frequently? So we thought we can definitely get the information out and make it not a requirement because we don't have the time or resources to verify that everybody that comes into the community has taken this class, but offer it as an incentive and something that maybe landlords could say, hey, if you're going to rent from me, I expect you complete this, and then figure out how we can give them some type of verification that is completed. I think the thought with it is kind of multifold. A better tenant makes a better landlord, makes a better community, makes a better neighbor. It's also, though, like folks, especially some of our low-income earners, and that might be from different communities, they move into our town and they don't know that, garbage, if in excess of one bag goes out, you got to have it tagged or the different rules. And they're different every community you go to. And I thought that might be something that was just unique to low-income earners, and I thought that's something that the landlords maybe should be educating their tenants on. But then I rented a home to an engineer that came from a different community, and I thought, this guy's a highly educated, highly sophisticated person, and he had the same questions. And I thought, well, we're dropping the ball here by not getting the information out to people that are coming into our community about, what the expectation is. And we do hand out, so to be fair, we do hand out information when they sign up for a utility account. But when you're moving into a place, where does that go? I mean, in a pile.
There's so much stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we could do a better job, and that's the stuff that we're working on. But before you know what you have to work on, you have to identify the problem. And so, we're not opposed to criticism or feedback, and I guess that's a big part of why I'm here. Is I want to tell you what we're doing, but I want to open the door to have people call us and say, hey, this is something that you could do better, or this is something that, we've struggled with as landlords or as tenants or as real estate buyers, and the city's interfered in some way or whatever it is.
That's great. Yes, hopefully the right people are hearing this. So the inspections checklist, is that where someone should start?
Yes. And I got a little off track on that answer, but that's a great place to start. It gives you as general of an idea as we could on everything we look at in every building. And it doesn't follow the traditional checklist walkthrough model. So the reason is, if I tried to do that, I'd end up with a 30-page document, right?
Oh, yes.
And we wanted to keep it short and sweet. Basically, what we're looking at is all interior surfaces. We're looking for deteriorated paint or surfaces. So we have old building stock in Dubuque, and old building stock means probably some lead paint. And if it's deteriorated, we get reports that come through our department for inspections when a child is poisoned. And every time a child is poisoned, it's because we've failed to prevent it. I mean, it's a totally preventable thing. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we're looking for everywhere. Making sure floor coverings, wall coverings, anything is just intact and being maintained. I think that's often overlooked, is that we're not out there to make sure that these buildings are up to new construction. It's that they're maintained. The one instance now that we're seeing a lot more of is windows. We actually changed the ordinance because we were seeing that maintenance over time was replacing windows, right? But often in the past, when people replace windows, they didn't do it under permit, and there was quite a long time where windows didn't require a permit. So people would put in whatever window fit the opening and was the most affordable. I don't fault them for it. They were trying to improve their property, but by not knowing the code and by not having us require a permit, they put in windows that are often deficient, so they're undersized. They changed like the operating style of the window, and that's more recently been kind of one of the things we've intentionally changed, because windows, especially in sleeping rooms, are a secondary way out. So if you have a fire in a home and the bedroom door is blocked, if you don't have a window of adequate size to get out of, or for a fire personnel to get in, you might be trapped. And so all of these things, I guess, I'm going to go way off topic, but all of these things also play into what's called our insurance, or the ISO rating for the city, Insurance Standards Organization rating, and they impact homeowners' insurance rates.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know that. There's also a part of that ISO rating is the BCAGS rating, or Building Code Grading and Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule. It's not an acronym that rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
But so all these things play into how much you pay for your insurance. And the better job we do, the lower the insurance rates go in the community. And so I think that's a piece that we don't say often enough. It's in our budget presentation, but how many are geeking out on the city's budget presentation?
No, yeah, can't say spend a Saturday night doing that.
Right.
So, okay. So actually so the windows have recently changed. I've heard this as well. So what did the code used to say? What does it say now? And, why the change? Aside from, it seems like now maybe, obviously safer, but then also it's helping with insurance. The benefit is that it's helping with insurance, safer for the tenant, safer in case of fire.
Yep. So the code language previously in the International Property Maintenance Code said that windows had to be, or emergency escape openings. It's not actually a window because it could be a door, it could be another type of opening, but they had to be maintained in effect with the code at the time of construction. So if your house, say your house is built in the 80s, had to be in accordance with the house, the code in the 80s.
So you were keeping track of all these different, what year is this built? Oh, here's the different code for that era. And you were having to kind of track all those down. Okay.
And that was the easy part, though. That sounds hard, but that's actually not that hard. What was hard is over time, people would replace them. And if they weren't done under permit, that's now the code in effect at the time of construction is the date of replacement.
Oh, so they got to go with wow. Okay. So then, you see a newer window in an older building. It's like, well, when was this done?
Yep.
No permit's been pulled. So then you got to track that down.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's complex.
So we were able to pretty precisely register the codes in effect back to about 1960. And pretty much it's complete consistency from 1960 through modern codes. The window requirements haven't changed. It's been 5.0 square foot at grade, 5.7 square foot net openable area above grade, so first floor and above. And so we knew anything that had been touched since 1960 should have met that code. The window sill heights changed a little bit. There was a period of time where they allowed a 48-inch sill height, and then it went to 44, and it's been that way for pushing 50 years now. But what we did is we said, okay, so we know that was the minimum code for the last 60 years. And we know that before that, we would have a really difficult time determining what the code is. We would spend immense amounts of staff time trying to go through old council documents, finding what the locally adopted code was. So we said, let's just set a common minimum threshold for what window sizes need to be or emergency escape opening sizes need to be. And what we came up with was 24 inches high, which is consistent with that code language that had been in effect since the 60s, 20 inches wide. So if you multiply 20 by 24, you come up with 3.3 square feet. And we actually had some testing done too, some folks with like fire gear on trying to get in and out of a window. And we said, well, if they can get through 3.3 square feet, that's great. And they couldn't.
With all their fire equipment.
Yep. So it required that one of those dimensions was larger so that they could adjust their pack or do whatever needed to be necessary to get in. But if they had 24 inches height by 20 inches width, and one of those dimensions was wider, they could manage to get through. So we set the minimum net openable area at 4 square feet, which was kind of the minimum we were seeing he was able to get through that opening. And so that's 20% less than what modern code requires at 5 square foot or 5.7. But again, we're not trying to bring all these old buildings up to modern code. We're trying to get them to the minimum level that achieves the safety that's necessary. So there was a lot of thought and a lot of effort that went into that. And, you never know if it's perfect. And if anyone were ever to be harmed because we didn't go hard enough, you question if we should have done something different. But at this point, it seems to be a fair kind of balance of safety versus financial cost. And the other thing we did with that code change is we created a window program. So if we come in and inspect and write up the windows for not meeting that size requirement, and your tenant is low or moderate income, we can actually use community development block grant funding, so CDBG funding, to help offset the material expense of upgrading that window to a code compliant window. So that's something that landlords could take advantage of if they have the lower income tenant. Do they need to be on a voucher? They don't need to be on a voucher. If they are on a voucher, though, it makes it way easier because if you've ever done anything with a program, there's a lot of information you have to collect from a tenant about their financials. So like their income and we need check stubs and all that. If they're on, say, Section 8 program or any of our assistance programs, they're automatically qualified. We have all of that information already. So makes your life a lot easier as a landlord. Yeah. You don't have to go track them down, get their financials, all those things. Makes sense. And I think a lot of people, when they talk about windows, I got this building, I've had this building as a rental for so long, now I got to change the windows. When they originally put the windows in 30, 40, however long years ago, were they not thinking like a fireman might need to go through there? Because I can see, probably a lot of landlords are thinking, well, here's the deal. Someone could easily fit out of this window. It's a big enough window, but when you talk about, and I hadn't really thought much about this, when you talk about a firefighter needing to get in there, they got a big oxygen tank. Yep. That totally flips the script a little bit. It's like, some of these old windows that have been in place forever, they've been working great. If there were a fire in there, a firefighter wouldn't have been able to get in there for a long time. Right. Yeah. We actually had a situation in the past year where we had to remove a tenant from a building. So it's a bit of an unusual situation. It wasn't because of a fire. It was that her primary access to the apartment was a stairway and it collapsed. And so she wasn't able to get out and we needed to get her out. So we sent the fire truck down there with the ladder and got it right up against the window. And the window actually meets our minimum code, but she still struggled for about 15 minutes while they were trying to get her out. Now, she wasn't a small person, but we have to recognize that not everybody's the same size, right? So we have to build things that accommodate at least the majority of our residents. So if somebody has a window issue, where would they think they want to apply for this city grant to make some fixes there. So they need to, and they don't have a voucher tenant. Yep. They need to track down the finances of their tenant and report that to you guys at the housing department? Very first thing they would do would be hit our website and look for the information for the window program. So if you wanted to walk through where that's at, I can take you right to it.
Perfect. Some people might be watching this on video so they can kind of see it live action.
So let's see. I think you're going to have to go back to the housing's main site, and it's going to be under our Try housing program forms and applications.
Yes, there it is. There's a lot of resources on here, folks. There it is. Window program for emergency escape.
Under the category, I am a landlord. So that's generally where you want to look. We tried to separate out programs by who might be looking. So,
See, this is great for you too, because if somebody calls you you're busy, you're on the road, whatever, you can refer them to your website.
Yep. Yeah, we do our best. I mean, there's, like you said, there's a lot of information. It's hard to keep it all up to date exactly with everything that changes. But certainly, if it's something you're interested in, start on the website. If you don't see it there, let us know that you're not seeing it there and that you thought you heard about it somewhere. You heard about it on the Rob's podcast and can't find it on the site, and we'll make sure it either gets to the site or we get you to the right place on the site.
Very good. A couple steps here, folks, all on the website. Very good. Cool. Wow, there is a lot of stuff here. Cool. So the windows have become more common here recently. This was a question I had from someone on Instagram who was curious. Mm-hmm. What is, and I actually was able to find this info on your website, but share it with the listeners. What's the number one inspection item you guys find?
Well, I think it's probably changed a little bit over time, but I would say windows are kind of our number one, and not necessarily the size, but there's just so many things that can go wrong with a window. It doesn't stay in the open position, which creates a hazard, that prop that people have in the window a lot of times when my inspectors go in. If a child dislodges that, that's a guillotine waiting to come down. It's dangerous.
Yeah. Geez, some of those old ones will really slam down hard.
I've had inspectors that have had some pretty serious injuries to their hands, and I've seen actually property owners jump in and try to open a window that we couldn't get to operate properly, and it drops and hurts them. And it's an unfortunate thing. It's a fairly simple fix, but on a window, you've got that issue. You've got broken glass. You've got missing or damaged screens. You've got the size thing that we're talking about. There's just so many things that can go wrong with that simple component, and all of them are a big deal. So I think sometimes people think we pick on windows a little bit, but they all lead to injury in one way or another. And we're first and foremost about safety. Beyond that, I would say smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. As a landlord, I certainly understand, you might go in and make sure all your smoke alarms work prior to the inspection, but the tenant burns their toast and it's gone the next day. And so that's kind of a constant battle. There's some tricks that we advise landlords on. There's different types of alarms. So we're getting to see more of the 10-year sealed battery style, where they can't just pop the battery out, but they can still take those down and throw them in a drawer, and they're no good then.
Yeah.
The other thing I've gone to a little bit more for my properties is it's a very small alarm, and I think most people don't even know what it is when they see it. It's about the size of a golf ball. It's called I think it's an Atom, ATOM. I'm not recommending the product, but it's something that I've found works for me because it's got an odd size lithium ion battery, so there's no reason to take it out or try to put it in the remote. They look kind of cool. And they're a photoelectric alarm too, so they're less prone to false alarms. So there's a couple different alarm styles, photoelectric or ionization. Ionization is your cheapest model typically, but they're more prone to false alarms. So, spend $5 extra so that it's there when you need it. That's kind of my theory.
This is fancy. I've never seen this. $37 at Lowe's, folks.
Oh, you can get them a lot cheaper than that. I don't think I've ever spent over $20 on them.
Really? Where you find it?
I bought them at Menards mostly.
There you go. And it looks cool. Yeah, I bet a lot of people might not even know what that is.
And so,
you get anyone asking you hey, are you listening to me? The thing looks like a little bit like a speaker on the side.
Yep.
If they see the USB port, I bet.
That's actually the test button.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you seeing these? Are these common? I can't say I've ever seen them.
They're not super common. I actually had a landlord that found them, or he was the first one that installed one, and I said, "What the heck is that?" And he showed me. He had the packaging right there, and I verified that it had the required, met the requirements, and I thought that's pretty cool. So I went and researched them myself a little bit more, and said, "Yeah, that's absolutely makes sense. It's just way less prone to." False alarms, but to tenant interference. If they don't know what it is, they're probably not going to mess with it.
Yeah. So then, landlords need a smoke alarm in every sleeping area and outside the door of every sleeping area?
Yep. So first thing, one on each floor, regardless of whether you have bedrooms, one on every floor. And then in addition to that one required on every floor, one inside the sleeping room. So I like to give people practical advice. Like the reason that is, it seems kind of counterintuitive, right? You got one on the inside of the door, 3 feet, 4 feet away. You've got one on the outside of the door. Why is that? Well, because if the fire starts in the kitchen and the door is closed, that one outside the door is going to alarm. But if your candle knocks off your nightstand and starts the fire in the bedroom, it's not going to get to that one outside the bedroom. So you probably want that one inside the bedroom to wake you up before your bed's on fire.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you have, because that's a very commonly open and shut door. Like
Yep.
you might sleep with the door shut. You might shut it during the day or whatever.
Yep.
Makes sense. Wow, there are so many ways we could take this. What are some other things that you're seeing right now? Like some common things you're seeing out there right now, and just in your everyday inspections, and some things that you'd really like landlords to know?
So landlords, first off, if you can do anything, make sure you have a relationship with your tenant and that they know to go to you first. It's the first thing I learned in being a landlord is build that rapport so that the tenant has an issue, they come to you. We do our best at the city to prevent, nuisance complaints. So like if your tenant calls us, first thing we're going to ask is, did you mention this to the landlord? And what we've seen is over time it's improved, but especially when I started, well, no, we didn't report it to the landlord. The landlord's a real jerk, and I don't want to talk to him. So I want you to deal with our problems, and that's not what we're there for.
Right.
Landlords and tenants need to build that relationship and have rapport and work together. The city is kind of a last resort for getting in between those or in on those issues. So really, I would encourage landlords to focus on building that relationship at the time that they're showing and leasing the apartments. And beyond that, kind of what I told you before is know the city is not trying to be involved in your business any more than we have to be. So if you take the initiative to pull that inspection checklist, kind of go through your property ahead of time, make sure you're driving by your properties once in a while, make sure you're going into your properties once in a while. So we only inspect about every 5 years. And something that I was just blown away by when I moved back to Dubuque. I started with the Lead and Healthy Homes program, and I went into a property, and the property owner was getting a substantial amount of grant funding to make improvements to the property. And he goes, wow, I've spent more time in here with you guys in the past hour than I've been in here in the last 5 years.
Wow.
And I thought, how is that possible? And then there again, like that's absolutely possible because I can see that nobody has given this property any love or attention in the past 5 years at least.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big part of it, recognizing that there's a balance between that tenant's privacy and right to have the space be theirs, but also, a landlord's responsibility to make sure the tenant's maintaining it, make sure that, there aren't things going wrong that aren't being reported. I've had that issue come up where, a landlord says, well, my roof had been leaking and the tenant never reported it to me. And now there's $10,000 or however much in damages. And it's like, well, that didn't happen overnight, right? So if you go into your property every 6 months or every year, you can catch these things before they become big. And so that's kind of my advice to landlords would be build that relationship so your tenants feel comfortable, and then don't walk away and think everything's fine. Make sure you're checking in pretty regularly.
Yeah. And you can also get renter's insurance to help out with some issues like that. I don't know if that would help all the way with the $10,000 roof leak, but I know it'd probably help in some situations.
Yeah, and I'm not an insurance agent by any means, but my understanding of renter's insurance is that if it's a negligence item, it's probably not going to cover beyond their belongings that are damaged. So, obviously talk to your insurance provider, your building insurance. We have dealt recently with the explosion on Loris. I'm sure you've seen. Oh,
yes. Let's go into it.
So, I mean, it's amazing. And it really gave me a new appreciation for insurance. I've dealt with insurance through fires. My dad's had a fire on one of his buildings, and we rehabbed it, and I saw how his insurance company treated him fairly well. But on Loris, it was great because we got to see a bunch of different insurance companies coming in, and I got to see ones that were on site the day after, the event, and were on top of it, assisting their clients, getting contractors to come in and board and secure and do all the things that we as a city are telling the property owners, these are the things that have to be done. The proactive insurance companies had their representatives out in the field helping their clients get those things because they've gone through maybe not an explosion before, but they've certainly gone through catastrophic loss before. They know what needs to be done and how to move it along. Then we had another person whose insurance company wouldn't respond to them for the first couple days. Then when they finally did get a call back from the call center, they scheduled a structural engineer, but it was going to be a couple weeks before they could get there. And so, mind you, this was their home. This wasn't a rental situation.
Ooh.
But they're basically without a home because we had condemned it. And they didn't have really any guidance from their insurance. We did our best to help guide them along. Luckily, they had family in town that they could reside with. But they really just kind of left out on a limb to dry. And now we finally did hear that they did get a resolution with their insurance, but it's been, months.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
And meanwhile, some of the other ones are nearly complete. They're waiting on windows because windows have been delayed by manufacturers due to COVID. So a lot of those properties are pretty well cleaned up and ready to go, just waiting for the new windows to come in. So
Gotcha. And what was your involvement in that whole situation? I'm sure it was like, what do you remember when you saw it, like, or when you first heard of it? How'd you first hear of it? And what was your initial reaction?
So I pretty routinely work late, and that night was no different. So I was at the office and just left the office and was actually headed over towards. I was headed down Main Street, I believe, or might have been Locust. Yeah, it was Locust, and I was at the last stoplight before you got to 14th. So I was 2-3 blocks, probably diagonally from it, and it was the strangest kind of reverberation through my vehicle. And I thought it was either my truck or the person that was at the light next to me's vehicle, like having some type of
So you
issue.
were within blocks of it when it actually went down.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I knew exactly what it was a couple moments later because I saw cellulose insulation kind of coming down from the sky, and I went, oh boy, I know what that is. So got up to Loris, saw the flashing lights where they had the roads blocked, and just knowing that it was kind of going to fall in my lap anyway, I went ahead and pulled up and went up and didn't get involved in the situation, but tried to get an assessment of what properties were affected, and we use Microsoft Teams, so I immediately started messaging my team, and some of our networks were down that night, so not everybody got the messages, but we're not first responders by any means.
Holy
but since
cow.
we were right there, we did have people. I think I had 2 inspectors, actually 3 inspectors, myself, and our supervisor, Alexis, were all on site that night, assisting people, working with the Red Cross, making sure that they had temporary shelter, just kind of getting through that initial triage of that situation. So not first responders, but we certainly do everything we can to assist because they have to focus on, putting out the fire and doing that initial investigation to figure out what happened. So
What a crazy thing. Now, if I would have say I owned a duplex right next door, and I'm the landlord, do I pay for my tenants to be housed in a certain place for the next until things boil over, or what would I have done if I was a landlord next door?
So our advice to landlords in that area was immediately talk to your tenants and your insurance agent. Those are the 2 things you need to do. Your tenants you need to make sure they're okay and that they had a place to be. And the Red Cross was assisting with that, like at least some hotel rooms for a couple nights or whatever. But the insurance is really where it comes in, because even though it wasn't any of those property owners' fault, right? It's still their insurance comes in and handles that initial triage, gets them up and running, gets their building secured. Depending on what level they're insured at, they might have loss of use. They might have things like tenant relocation coverage. So, their insurance might pick up all of that, and then it goes through the investigation process, and then there's when they determine who's responsible, there's, that insurance would pick up all the losses. And that actually has come through fairly quickly. And I'm a little outside of the main circle of people that deal with that, but I understand there's been a subrogation on that. So there's already been somebody that said, yep, we're picking this up. So all your claims will be subrogated to that primary carrier. That can take years to sort out in court, and that's why we tried to tell property owners, like, don't get focused about who's to blame. Just focus on fixing what you can, taking ownership of what you can do, and then work with your insurance company to figure out who's going to pay the bill at the end of the day. But that might take years, and set realistic expectations and just move forward with your life. Don't let this hold you up. So.
Love that advice. Man, I tell you what, if I would have been owning a property next door, I probably would have been there either that night or the next morning. I'd been like, oh man, I'm feeling frustrated. But if Ben comes up to me and says, hey, let's start focusing on what we can actually control here. Let's take ownership of what we can do and move forward. Man, I'm feeling good if you come up and say that. You got a poise to you. It's like I don't know, you got a calming presence. I think if I were freaking out, I think you'd be a calming one to talk to.
It's certainly a skill that's been developed over time. There's not much I haven't seen in rentals, or in properties in general. So, if you give me a new situation I haven't seen before, it won't be the only time I see it in my career because this stuff is all too common.
Yeah. Speaking of some of the crazy things, what are some of the crazy things you've seen? And then what is, I had here written down, what's like the worst condition you've seen?
So craziest
Stories.
thing, so I'm the supervisor now. I don't get out in the field much. So most of these are secondhand accounts, but inspectors going into a place, one of my more seasoned inspectors was training a junior inspector, and they went in, and it was a hoarded household, which is not something that's unusual or outside of our scope. We deal with that frequently. That doesn't even register on our scale.
Yeah.
But there was a couple crates behind this person, the occupant of the home, that were covered with blankets. And he said they could kind of see the blankets moving. They thought maybe some dogs or something, but they just kind of were curious. So they asked the occupant about it. And she said something along the lines of, "Those are my bottle babies." And I thought, "What are bottle babies?" And they asked if they could see, and here she had two fawns
Really?
in cages
Oh my
inside of her
God.
apartment. And
That's crazy.
that there were a significant number of issues with that apartment or that home, and it ended up being condemned shortly after that, and I hope she found the help she needed and found a better place to be. But it's nice in our role, like we get to see that initial shock, things that aren't going well, just kind of disassociated property owners and a tenant that's not taking care of the place. And then we also get to see after the condemnation, and there was actually a foreclosure involved in that property, and then it went into new developers' hands, and it's actually been cleaned up, I believe. I don't know if it's a rental now or if it was resold, but I mean, you would never recognize it. It looks 100% different. It looks like a great, nice new, maybe not new construction, but a nicely renovated home. So it's kind of funny, the history on these properties that we develop over time. And we'll never share specifics of a unit or talk about, put people down for their situations. But
right. Everyone's got their situation. Yeah.
Yep. But it can be, it's an exciting career, I guess.
Every day a little different.
Yep. Yeah.
Every house a little different. So what are some of like top-notch rental units that you've been through? Like where you walk through for your inspection, and like, wow, this is perfect. Everything's up to code. It looks great. It's in good condition. How do you know? Like you've seen some of those,
Sure.
maybe?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The funny thing is, I top-notch rentals, obviously, we get into some of the brand new construction. They're $2,500, $3,000 a month. They're executive rentals. Those are great. They don't really terribly thrill me. I used to build custom homes. I wasn't unaccustomed to being in multi-million-dollar homes. So, it's a fancy rental, certainly. But really what impresses me more is when I get into like a historic property. And especially in Dubuque, like we've got all these really cool historic properties, and outside you don't know what you're getting into. Like you might go in and it's a dive, or you might go in and it's been totally restored or is maintained. That's kind of the coolest, is when they've really been just maintained. People have taken good care of them over 150 years, and you get to see some of the nature or quality of construction that they used to employ back in the 1860s even, and those are the neatest, I guess, for me. I think of some of those, they come to mind, like they're just unadulterated. They're original and maintain that character of what was built.
Can't replace it.
Right. Yeah.
Those
Once
old
it's
ones.
gone, it's gone. So.
What's the oldest building in Dubuque?
Ooh.
That I did not prepare you for.
Yeah.
I've seen 1850 something on like a house that's sold.
Oh yeah, 1850s is not uncommon. I want to say 1820s I've seen.
Whoa, that's getting old.
That's getting out there, yep.
200 years. Holy cow. I've also heard, I've never been to Europe, but I've heard it's really cool in that way. Like a lot of their infrastructure and their buildings and everything is like 500 years old.
Yep.
Isn't that'd be, geez.
Yeah, so I had an inspector that went to Spain recently and brought back a bunch of photos and stories about, some of what he saw. Obviously, inspectors are seeing buildings a little bit differently maybe than other people. And it's really definitely on my bucket list to get over Germany, especially with the age, but also the emphasis they put on energy efficiency and sustainability. I think that's great, and I think that's the way that the world kind of has to move. So, definitely bucket list. Hopefully, when the kids get old enough to appreciate it, we can drag them along too and teach them an appreciation for those things.
Yeah, that would be a bucket list item on mine as well. It'd be a very cool place to be. So talk about just going back in general now. You've been with the city for now almost 9 years. You've made a lot. There's been a lot of changes that have been made in the last 9 years since you've been in. Kind of reintroducing new, safer codes. Maybe you switched. It's my understanding that we now follow a more national code. And correct me if I'm wrong here. But just if you want to talk about some of those big changes that have been made and just like implementing that, because I know we've talked before, like there were some rentals that hadn't been inspected in who knows how long. Mm-hmm. And so now you're trying to get them on every 5-year schedule, and that's a process in itself. So
yeah.
Couple things on that, I guess.
Yeah, no, sure. So like kind of what I said before, when I came here, it wasn't with, any illusion that things were perfect. So I knew that we were going to spend some time identifying the challenges and trying to solve those. And I think it was about 2015, actually, I know it was 2015 that I started to be recognized as a leader in our inspections group, and I hadn't earned my title yet, but had started working with the department director on some changes that were needed to be made. And kind of the first thing, I don't know if you know this if you're not in government, but the first thing you need to do is look at your funding source, because if you're funded by taxes, you're pretty much always on the chopping block, because if tax revenue goes up or down, or there's something that's more important than what you do, you can get cut pretty quickly. And so we did, the very first thing we did kind of under my direction was to implement an improved fee structure that allowed our department, or our division of our department, to be more self-supporting. So when you think about rental inspections, you think, who does it benefit, right? And I think there's an argument to be made that it benefits the entire community. There's an argument to say that the largest benefit might be the tenant, but also it benefits other landlords and property owners because we're maintaining property values and that type of thing. So we said we think the biggest benefit is probably to tenants, and we can't bill tenants for our services. Who bills tenants for the services? Well, that's the landlord. So if we charge the landlord for our services and they increase their rent by, $3, $4 a month, that's approximately the cost of our services. Then the rent goes up just incrementally, but the tenant gets a better rental unit. Dubuque gets a better rep for people coming into town that are looking for places to rent, because we had kind of routinely heard that people would maybe be interested in moving to Dubuque, but when they looked at what was available for housing, they were so discouraged that they, packed up and changed their minds. Yeah,
we don't want that either.
Right. So, we did that was the first thing, was to implement a fee structure that allowed us to be largely self-supporting. The next thing I identified was the code. They had operated off of a local code that had been modeled after what's called Housing Quality Standards, or HQS. That's something that's adopted by HUD for like the Section 8 program. And there really was no training or guidance on how to interpret or apply the code. And HUD uses HQS, pretty openly, because different people enforce HQS. It could be enforced, different housing authorities have like their case managers do inspections. And I mean, one of the things that my inspectors brought back from the training was, well, did you know that HQS, their guidance was, if the hole in the wall is smaller than a paper plate, it's not a big deal. Or if there's less than 8 pieces of graffiti, that it's a note and not a fail. Like, wow, that's not acceptable. I mean, no. So we recognized that we needed to be a little bit more diligent with the code. And there was a model code out there, the International Property Maintenance Code. I had just helped Cedar Rapids I sat on their Board of Appeals in Cedar Rapids, and I'd helped them with the adoption of that code in that community. And I had worked for Iowa City, where they didn't adopt the International Property Maintenance Code, but they used an even more stringent model based on building code. And so I got to see different methods, and I thought the International Property Maintenance Code was a good fit for Dubuque. So I started working with a small group here at getting that, and we ended up getting that adopted in July of 2016. And so then on to the next step. Like I'm a very chronological thinker. I always like, let's get past this step or this hurdle and get on to the next. And the next was software. So we didn't have a software in-house that allowed us to do anything other than input inspections, and it was on a per unit basis. So say I inspected a 12-plex, it was 12 times the work as doing it by the building, right? So we, I guess I was lucky in that my past employer down in Iowa City had sent me to some national trainings. I had some exposure to software developers and some bigger cities and understood what the capabilities were of a good software. And I was able to work with another small team to get us in a place where we could purchase the Acela automation software, which is one of the leaders kind of in the industry for inspections and building permitting and licensing. So we've been building that, and that's not one of those, yes, you get it and it's done. It's like you continue building the boat in the water for years. So we're still working on improvements to that, but it's that was a huge step forward for us, because how you can't identify the problems without good data. And that software was really our first step into allowing us to gather good data. So, and then 2018, we made some changes to our fee structure. 2019, I think was when we brought in a new department director, Alexis, and we really kind of launched then because we had some of that foundational work done. And she's been, instrumental in helping us move forward with some of the more refined changes that needed to continue to happen. And community engagement was a huge part of that. So that's, again, why I'm here today,
Yeah. Community engagement. Just how else are you involved in the community? And then I want to kind of dive into some of your things that you brought in.
So I guess I spend my life mostly at work. And so I do a lot of things that involve my work, but it's not just because of work. I'm passionate about real estate. So when I show up to REI, it's selfish because, it helps me at work. It helps me get the message out. It's because I'm interested by it. It's what gets me, gets my heart going, is sitting at, like I said, an auction. I've been high bidder on a couple of those, and it's just, that's kind of an adrenaline junkie, by nature. I grew up in snowboarding and wakeboarding and skating, and I kind of gave up a lot of that as I got older because my body didn't recover so much. But that little shot of adrenaline you get from being in some of those, or every real estate transaction, for somebody like me, I do one every few years. Like, it gets your blood boiling or pumping, and you're excited, and you learn to overcome kind of the emotion of a transaction. And I'm sure as a real estate agent, I'm guessing that you're kind of beyond that because you're doing it all the time. But I coach so many of our younger people that are getting into homeownership on that. Like, there's a door on every corner, and you cannot let your heart get too wrapped up by the door. You have to focus on what your needs are versus your wants and your budget. And
that's great.
So I do a lot of that.
I could take that as a realtor and run with that. That's good for me too. That's a good one. So then, what do you say to the landlord who's like, "What the heck? Why do we got to have all these inspections? What are we doing? We're making it hard for me. I can't make any money. Gosh, it's so stressful. I hate these inspections. All the grief, all the stress. It's like, man, the city is on my back. They just want my money. Blah blah blah." What do you say to that?
Landlording is not a business without stress. So if you think it is, don't put your foot in that door, because it's not a business without stress. That's going to be my first advice. But if you can get past that initial stress, the city isn't here to make your job harder. We're actually there to be a partner in making sure that we've got good quality rental housing in town. And I think most landlords or people getting into it don't want to get into it, not to provide quality housing. I think some people are less proficient at running their numbers ahead of time. And I think certainly there's a youth element to, getting into it because you're excited about, you saw somebody be successful in real estate and now you want to jump into it both feet, but you don't have the capital needed to make the improvements to the property.
HGTV.
Yeah, you got it.
Yep.
So I think that's a big part of that messaging that we get out is, hey, come to this training, come learn about what you're jumping into, learn about this investment before you make it, because once you're in it, it can be painful if you made a mistake. And I don't think that's unique to landlording though, right? So if you're going to invest in a business, say you're investing in a restaurant, you probably want to know what it takes to build out a successful restaurant and how to project your revenues and expenses. You got to do the same stuff with landlording. And I think some people oversimplify it when they get into it. And I guess that's a big part of it. Educate yourself before you get into it. It's a life-altering decision if you make a mistake, and certainly there's stress involved with that. And the city is, unfortunately, sometimes part of that stress. And so we get a negative relationship with some folks, but it's generally not, it's not by design that we're trying to stress them out. It's that you didn't put all the thought into this that you needed to.
Yeah, because I hear landlords too, and they'll stress about the upcoming inspection. But I love, just the way you just kind of take the emotion out and think reality here. It's good for the whole community if our rentals are in better shape.
Right.
And it's good for the tenant. It's good for the landlord as well. Yeah, I like it. Very good. Anything else before we kind of roll into these closing questions from your end? Like the message you really like to get out? I know we've talked a lot about that. Anything else?
Well, so I know we kind of said, where I'm at now in our progress state is really focusing on community engagement. So I'm here talking to you today, and I want other, especially influencers in real estate or rental properties or building codes or any of that, if they're interested in either having their concerns heard, bring them to me, or if they're interested in helping us spread the message of what we're trying to achieve collectively, let's get together and let's make that, work for everybody. And, I attend REI meetings when I can. I do Landlords Association meetings. One of the big changes that's coming to our department is we're actually merging with the Building Services Department. So we'll be overseeing, not just rental code and rental inspections, but also building inspections and permitting. And so that's really going to ramp up, both our training and the ability to cross utilize inspectors, but it's going to really, I think, improve customer service. But I think there's a lot of fear and trepidation because, it's a big change. It's a really big change for contractors and developers. And for rental property owners where, hopefully you see it as an improvement, but in the past, if we write up a window and you've got to replace it, you've got to call the building inspector. You've got to get a building permit, which is still going to be true, but you've got to call the building inspector, get them out before we come back out. So you're actually dealing with multiple layers of inspections, and we're trying to simplify that. I've got staff that's trained that can do those inspections. If we're sending an inspector out that's got the training and certifications to do that, let's make it a one-stop shop and not make it more difficult. And so that's a big change that's coming up. I want to get that information out, but I also want to accept feedback as we get into these changes. We want to know what's working and what's not.
I love that you're talking about accepting feedback, open door policy, call me, those type of things. Like, I think that's so big for the line of work that you're doing. And, yep. Some landlord might see like, oh, I got to replace $1,000 worth of windows, get all stressed. But, you're there to talk to them about it. Talk to me. If you don't think something was done right, like talk to me, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like too is like, a new safer code is good for the community in general. And, some of these landlords that have been around for a long time and they got so used to this older code.
Right.
I feel like that's probably a lot of the stress. It's like, man, it used to be so much easier to be a landlord. I didn't have to worry about a thing. And
right.
But now it's like, okay, let's take some ownership of our community and our, like we talked about, the floor level
right.
of some of these rentals. And that's good. I think it's all good. Really appreciate all that work. So very good. Let's roll into closing questions.
Okay.
All right. Number 1, what is your favorite book?
So
you seem like a reader. I'm just going to say it. I don't know if you are.
I wish I was more of a reader. My time doesn't allow me to read as much as I'd like. I kind of put on here my favorite books are the International Residential Code and Molly Lou Mellon because I'm somewhere split between work and family at all times.
Nice. What's Molly Lou Lemon about?
Molly Lou Mellon is about a girl who's got buck teeth and her grandma gives her some pretty sound advice about just owning who you are as a person. And so that's one of my favorite books to read to my daughter at bedtime. And so it's a joke, but it does kind of reinforce what I believe in. And that's why I like to read it to her, I suppose. And then anytime I'm reading, I'm not a big reader, but generally when I get kind of into a book, it's something that's based on self-improvement. So I did put down that one of the books I grabbed while I was on vacation a while back was How You Leave Them Feeling. And I think that's kind of,
it's a good one.
It speaks to kind of what I think is important. So integrity and making sure that you empathize or acknowledge people's, experiences, not yours. And, try to use the platinum rule, not just the golden rule. Think about how people want to be treated, not just how you would want to be treated.
Yes. Gosh, that was a breakthrough when I can't remember when I first saw that, but I was like, wow, this is way better. The golden rule, you grow up learning the golden rule, and then the platinum rule, treat others the way they want to be treated. It's like, wow, that's a mind shift.
Yeah, it's deep, and it's deep but not like unachievable. You just have to put some thought into it, because not everybody has your experience, so you have to recognize that their experience could be different and try to empathize with that and put yourself in a place that can communicate with them. So.
Cool. I said that's a good one, How You Leave Them Feeling. I had not heard it. I'm saying that's a good one. Just the title of it makes me like, ooh, I want to read that. So I got it written down here. That's the first time that's been shouted out on the podcast. So that would be a good one. I too like to dabble in self-improvement, those type of books. Okay. What are your hobbies?
So with COVID this year, we bought our boat, and that's honestly why I came back to Dubuque. Other than potential for career advancement, I grew up on the river, grew up snowboarding and skiing and doing all that type of thing. So we got our boat, and I don't regret it. They don't lie about boats being expensive and cost of maintenance and all that good stuff. But I'll tell you what, seeing the smiles on our kids' faces and getting out, when we've been limited in how much social interaction we can have, but having that to do is it's been fantastic. So yeah, boating is definitely my number one, but really building things, fixing houses, anything outside, I'm pretty just agreeable to doing just about anything.
That's awesome. Yeah, boating is another one. I grew up on a river, love boating, love wakeboarding. Yep. I've been wakeboarding for many years, skiing since I was a toddler. Yeah, it's a great time. You do any wakeboarding on the river here?
I used to. So my wife, we actually brought her wakeboard. I don't have a wakeboard of my own. I used to wakeboard with my buddy down in Iowa City, and he had the boat and the board down there, so we left all that stuff with him, but we brought hers back, and we haven't done it yet, but as the kids get a little older and we have a little bit more ability to start doing some of the stuff we enjoy, I think I will, but I did. So another thing that I don't share often, but I grew up doing skiing, skating, snowboarding, wakeboarding, and I've broken my leg wakeboarding. I've broken my leg snowboarding. I've broken my back skating. So I've blown out my shoulder snowboarding. So I've had my share of
that is
of
crazy.
abuse. So yeah, when I say my body doesn't heal quite as quick as it used to, yeah, there's some of those injuries that have left a lasting mark, and
wow.
I want to get back into it, but I want to make sure that I don't hurt myself to where I can't play with the kids or do stuff like that, because that definitely is where my priorities lie right now.
So you've done some gnarly tricks.
Yeah, back in the day, I used to be.
What were some of the cool ones?
Well, so me and my buddy started a skate park when I was, I think, finishing up high school, and I do a lot of flips I was actually
on a skateboard.
Inline skates, rollerblades.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I'd skateboard too, but I wasn't as good at that. And so over time, doing all the flips and landing from higher altitudes, I got compression fractures in my vertebrae, and that really screwed me up for a while. So
yeah,
and then flips on the snowboard too. Just when you are throwing your arms out to make that rotation, and you have one hit the ground and it goes in the wrong direction, it doesn't feel too hot. So
forward, backwards. Wow, I got a little. Reckless, I would say, on the skis last year. I wound up with a black eye from skiing. So my wife says I got to get a helmet this year. So, but the wakeboard broken leg. See, I've been around wakeboarding way more than the other ones. How do you break a leg wakeboarding?
I was trying some type of flip again, and I got obviously I had the bindings cranked down pretty tight, and somehow I got one foot out of the binding and the other foot stayed in when I wrenched around. And not probably too common, and it took me a little while. I'm fairly tough when it comes to overcoming pain. I walked up the hill on my broken leg at the ski hill.
Wow.
I was on the boat trying to shake it off, and when I can't shake off pain or shake something off, I know there's something more wrong.
Something wrong there. Wow. Jeez, I've seen someone smack their head against a wakeboard. That was gnarly.
Oof.
I myself have not endured any injuries on that, except I played football in college, and like 5 days before my freshman year opening practice, I was wakeboarding. Stupid. I can't believe I was doing that, but I like tweaked my knee and ankle.
Oh, yeah.
But cool. Those are awesome hobbies. Okay, if you had to point to one thing that you either learned, developed, or were just born with that makes you successful, what would that be?
So I think work ethic is a big part of who I am. When I say it, so I moved to Iowa City and I went to college there. I didn't complete college, and in hindsight, do I wish I had? Absolutely, but I've been able to kind of overcome the barriers of not having that college education by working really hard. And so, I guess when I raise our kids, like one thing I want to tell them is like work ethic is really critical. But so is education. And if you want to work less hard, focus on your education, because that's a big part of why I had to work twice as hard as somebody else to get to where I got to. And certainly, growing up, my dad worked full-time job, managed those apartments. Like, I know, I think my family, my brothers and sisters, we may be a little split on it. Like, I think it was a great thing that he did it for us. I was the baby of the family, but I think for them, they might have had a different experience because he was gone a lot. So, just recognizing, like, work ethic, the platinum rule, those are kind of my key guiding factors. So.
Love that. Who is someone you're wanting to meet? Anyone. Got to be living.
So this was one of the hardest questions because you kind of sent me some of these, and I don't idolize anybody. Like, I want to meet anybody that influences the direction of our planet, but real specifically, just I was blown away by Amanda Gorman? She was the poet laureate that gave the speech at President Biden's inauguration. I won't get political, but I just thought that speech was amazing. I stood in front of our little Google Home device this morning with my kid watching it, and I was inspired. And, I hope that there's a lot of that. And I guess those are the people I would most like to meet, is the youth that are up and coming leaders that are going to direct this world and where it goes and what we focus our energy on. So I put her, but really anybody that's got influence and cares about improving the world we live in.
Love that answer. I have not heard that speech yet, but I did see like 5 people shout it out on my Instagram feed earlier today. So I'm like, something got to be good here.
Yeah,
I probably should listen to that.
Grab yourself the 6 minutes and sit back. It's
good 6 minutes.
It's a good one.
Very cool. What are you currently focusing on, and how can the listeners help you?
So for that, that was also a hard one. I don't know why these ones are hard. They should be the easy ones, but I feel like I get pulled in a million different directions. And I when you say, what are you focusing on? I'm focusing on a lot of different little projects. But I think the biggest one that your listeners could help with is getting the message out of what, my department or my division is there for. And, making sure that new landlords, or you as a realtor, making sure property owners know what they're getting into. Saying, have you thought about calling the housing department? I know they've got some programs available to first-time home buyers, or, hey, this is a fixer, but, you might want to explore what's options are available to you at the housing department. That's really, I think, where you and your listeners can help me the most. So a million other small things if people really want to get more involved. Something I'd really like to see our community develop. And when we talk community development, we have teams that are focused on that in the city. And something that I'm looking forward to working on when COVID kind of breaks is getting some type of volunteer program for assistance for residents that are not able to maintain their property. So something we deal with a lot is grass and weeds, mowing the lawn or shoveling the sidewalks. And we certainly aren't in the business of enforcing and cutting people's lawns, and that's not what we want to do. But what seems to be disconnected right now is just neighborly, interaction. So something we're looking at is there's like a program called Snow Angels out in Denver, where you line up volunteers that are willing to shovel for elderly, disabled residents or, people that need that assistance. And it's not to say that, they don't have the ability to do everything. They might be able to knit or make a face mask for somebody, but they can't get out and shovel their lawn because of their limitations. So it's helping. That's something that I'd really like to see developed. And if anybody's interested in that type of volunteerism, I'd say reach out to me on that too, because that's a big opportunity for us as a community, is to connect neighbors and connect resources and help make sure that everybody has an equitable experience in Dubuque.
Love that. I really do. I think a lot of people love a quick way they could volunteer somehow.
Right.
It makes, I'll speak for myself, but I think a lot of people, it's like, gosh, if I could, if there's just a way that, I show up with my shovel and I scoop for an hour and I'm gone, I would get probably just as much enjoyment out of that as maybe the people who are getting their place shoveled.
Yep.
I think I'd probably enjoy it more. I love a little opportunity like that, and I think there's a lot of people who do, and I think That's a great idea, and that's cool to kind of think about that one moving forward.
Yeah.
So, cool. Bonus question. Here we go.
Okay.
If you had to rank these in order from your favorite to least favorite, how would you do it? Pancakes, waffles, French toast.
Waffles, pancakes, French toast. And here's waffles are a treat to me. So when I get a waffle, it's kind of usually, you always get them at a hotel because they've got the waffle iron or whatever, but you can make them a dessert. You can load them up with toppings. Pancakes are next best because that's kind of my specialty at home. Like when the kids say, Dad's home for the weekend, Dad, can you make us pancakes? Absolutely, I'm on it. That's my favorite thing it just whips up quick and everybody gets to throw on their berries and whatever they want on them. And it's easy. Not a lot of work goes into it, but it's something that's enjoyable. And then French toast, just not my jam. I'm not a big egg fan, so I don't know.
I love the description there. I was watching something earlier today. It was on Tom Brady. It was like something, I can't remember what the feature was, but it was talking about his part of his workout routine and then part of his diet and stuff. And he said his favorite meal was cooking pancakes for the kids on Sunday or on the weekend.
Yep.
And it's I think back to my childhood. That was special too. Pancakes on a weekend morning. It's and now that I'm an adult, it's what is it about pancakes? There's something about it, because it's just for most of these things, it's just the powder and the water and it's real quick. It's real easy, but it's it's special. It feels good,
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Very cool. And yeah, waffles are, they're a treat for sure. So very cool. Last question. How can people learn more about you?
So if you want to talk more, you can call me at my work or reach out by email. Obviously, the City of Dubuque's website, which you promoted earlier, cityofdubuque.org. My email is just my name, so bpothoff, Pothoff, at cityofdubuque.org. And I've got a direct line to my office so you don't get bounced around. It's 563-690-6075.
And everyone appreciates that direct line. All right. Appreciate it. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate you being on.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right. And that is going to do it for episode number 25 of Real Estate in the Tri-State. Please, listeners, if you got some value out of this, share it. There are landlords and tenants in Dubuque and people in the community who need to hear this type of information that's coming from, our employees, the city employees. So please share the content if you got some enjoyment out of it, and appreciate you guys tuning in. And with that, we are out.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Real Estate in the Tri-State. We want to encourage all of our listeners to send in any and all real estate questions to us at rottlerpodcast@gmail.com. More details in our show notes.
And as always, let's have a great day, folks.